The call came at 2:47 in the morning, and I knew before I even picked up that something was wrong. My sister never called that late. Not since we were teenagers, sneaking phone calls after our parents went to bed, whispering about boys and university applications and all the things we were going to do once we got out of Sudbury. That was 15 years ago. She had a husband now, a mortgage in Oakville, a whole life that looked perfect from the outside. Faye. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I need you to come. I was already sitting up in bed. What happened? Are you hurt? A pause. Too long. I fell down the stairs. I had a direct flight from Vancouver booked before she finished the sentence. Here is the thing about my sister Camille and me. We are not twins. She is 3 years older, and we have never looked particularly alike. She got our mother's dark hair and careful eyes. And I got our father's stubborn jaw and the kind of restless energy that made me enlist in the Army Reserves at 19, and eventually become a search and rescue coordinator for BC Emergency Management. We are different in almost every way that matters. But we have always been able to read each other the way you read a road you've driven 1,000 times. The slight hesitation before she said, I fell told me everything. Camille had not fallen down any stairs. I landed at Pearson at 6 a.m. She met me at the arrivals gate wearing a scarf in July, which told me the rest of what I needed to know. When she took it off in the car, I made her take it off. I said it quietly, but I meant it. There was a bruise along her collarbone that had gone that ugly yellow-green color. Old enough to be a week or two past its worst, not new. How long? I said. It was not a question. She looked out the passenger window at the highway. The 401 was already thick with morning traffic even at that hour, all those people driving to jobs and schools and ordinary lives. It's been a rough few months, she said finally. How long, Camille? She was quiet for a long time, then, almost 2 years. I kept both hands on the wheel and I did not say anything for a while, because what I wanted to say was not appropriate for 6 a.m. on a provincial highway. I thought about the last 2 years. I thought about every phone call where I had noticed something slightly off in her voice, and told myself I was imagining things. I thought about Christmas when her husband Marcus had been charming and funny, and kept refilling everyone's wine glass, and how Camille had watched him with an expression I had misread as affection. Okay, I said. Tell me everything. She had met Marcus Ashford at a fundraiser in Toronto 7 years ago. He was a commercial real estate developer, the kind of man who walked into rooms and made people notice him, all handshakes and easy confidence and a laugh that filled up whatever space he was in. She had been 31 and working as a senior architect at a firm downtown, doing well, independent, sharp. He had pursued her with a focus that she had at the time found flattering. They married after 2 years. She left her firm after 1 more. Not because he asked her to directly, she said. More because it became clear in the way things become clear when someone is very careful about never quite saying what they mean. There was always a reason her schedule was inconvenient. There was always a subtle comment about whether her job was really compatible with the life they were building together. There was always something that needed to be handled, that only she could handle. By the time she understood what had happened, she had been out of professional practice for 2 years, and the architecture job market had moved on without her. And then came the money. This is the part I want to explain carefully, because I know how it sounds from the outside. Camille is not naive. She has a master's degree. She is in many ways more analytically precise than I am. But Marcus had structured their finances in a way that was genuinely sophisticated in its control. Her name was on their joint checking account, but Marcus managed the investment accounts, the property holdings, the corporate accounts tied to the renovation business she had theoretically helped him start. Every large transaction required both signatures in theory. In practice, he had spent 2 years coaching her on when to sign and why until signing became reflex rather than decision. When she finally tried to get a clear picture of their actual financial situation, after the first time he hurt her, after she had spent a week telling herself she must have done something to cause it, she discovered that the renovation business had taken out a $340,000 line of credit with both their names on it. She had not known. She could not explain how her signature was on the paperwork. She had a faint memory of signing something at the kitchen table while he explained it was routine corporate renewal, and her stomach had dropped when she realized what she had actually signed. That was the leash. That was why she had not left. If I walk out, she said, I'm half liable for $340,000 in business debt. I consulted a lawyer. One consultation he doesn't know I paid cash, and she said it would be a very long process to contest the signature under duress, and in the meantime creditors could come after me. I have no income. I have been out of architecture for 3 years. I don't know how to. Stop, I said, stop. I need to think. We were sitting in her kitchen. The house was beautiful, a detached century home in Oakville that Marcus had renovated himself, all exposed brick and reclaimed wood, and the kind of tasteful details that got photographed for design magazines. I had always found it slightly airless, though I couldn't have said why before now. He's at a conference in Calgary until Friday, she said. He does not know I called you. Good, I said. Keep it that way. I poured us both coffee and I sat there for a long time thinking. I thought about Marcus, who I had met maybe a dozen times over 7 years. I thought about his handshake, which was always a fraction too firm, the kind of handshake that is about demonstration rather than greeting. I thought about a specific Christmas dinner where he had interrupted Camille 3 times in a single conversation and then laughed at himself and said he was just so enthusiastic, and how everyone at the table, including me, had laughed along. I thought about what I knew about men like Marcus Ashford. I knew a fair amount, both professionally and personally. I had worked with law enforcement on missing persons cases. I had done crisis negotiation training. I understood in a practical and unsentimental way how people in power positions think about the people they control. They think about them as extensions of their own will. They have a specific kind of blindness toward those people, a categorical assumption that the person will behave predictably, will fold under pressure, will not escalate. It had never once occurred to Marcus, I was quite certain, that my sister had a sister who had spent the last 12 years learning how to stay calm in situations that would disable most people. Camille, I said, I have an idea. And I need you to trust me. She looked at me across the kitchen table with our mother's eyes. Okay, she said. Whatever it is, yes. I should explain the idea because the obvious version of it is not quite accurate. I was not there to physically confront Marcus. That would have been satisfying and also useless. He would have called the police, pressed charges for trespassing or assault, and Camille would have been in a worse position than before. Men like Marcus understand leverage. You cannot take their leverage away with a fistfight. What I needed to do was more precise. While Camille was on the phone with her lawyer, the same lawyer she had seen before, a woman named Sandra who, when Camille called and explained the full situation, agreed to take the case and pushed aside her Thursday afternoon. I was going through the office Marcus kept in the basement. He had not locked it. He had not locked it because it would not have occurred to him that Camille would look. She had been trained, over years, not to look. I found the corporate incorporation documents. I found the line of credit agreement, and I photographed every page. I found 3 other lines of credit she did not know existed, 2 under the business name and one that appeared to be a personal loan in both their names, originated 18 months ago. I found statements that showed the renovation business had been functioning largely as a pass-through for real estate commissions being funneled into an account she had no visibility on. I am not a forensic accountant, but I have organized disaster response operations, and I know how to read a document set for structural inconsistencies. There were inconsistencies. Sandra the lawyer confirmed it when I photographed everything and sent it to her that afternoon. There was enough here to suggest financial misrepresentation at minimum, and possibly fraud, and certainly grounds to contest the debt signatures under a duress and undue influence argument. This is good, Sandra said on the phone. This is genuinely good. I need about 2 weeks to build the motion properly. We have until Friday, I said. When he gets back from Calgary, then we work with what we have by Friday. Here is the other part of the plan. The part that required me to do something I had not done since we were in our early 20s and used to confuse people at parties for fun. Camille and I do not look alike, but we are the same height, and our coloring is not so different that it is impossible. She wears her hair long, mine is shorter. She tends toward tailored, careful clothing. I live in whatever is functional. But if I dressed like her, if I wore her clothes, her hair pulled back the way she wears it, stood in her kitchen at her counter, in low light from a distance to a man who saw what he expected to see. He comes home on Friday night, she said. He will be tired from the flight. He will want dinner on the table. Does he always call when he lands? Always. And I always answer. You'll answer, from wherever you are. He hears your voice, everything sounds normal. I looked at her. Where are you going to be? Sandra offered her guest room. Perfect, Faye. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. What are you going to do? I'm going to have a conversation with your husband, I said, and I am going to record all of it. He landed at Pearson at 7:15 on Friday evening. Camille answered on the first ring, and they had a 90-second conversation about his flight and what was for dinner, her voice perfectly steady. And then she got in Sandra's car and drove to Etobicoke, and I stood alone in the kitchen of that beautiful Oakville house and felt the particular quality of silence that precedes something irreversible. I had changed into one of her linen blouses. Her hair clip held my hair back in roughly her style. The kitchen lights were low. She always kept them low in the evenings, apparently. On the counter, a pot of something on the stove, real food she had prepared before she left, because she said he would know immediately if there was nothing cooking. I had her phone on the counter, recording application open, screen face down. He came through the door at 8:20. I heard him drop his bag in the front hall, heard him go upstairs. The master bedroom, I assumed, changing out of his travel clothes, the way he apparently always did. I focused on breathing the way I had been taught to, diaphragmatic and measured, the technique I used when I was coordinating a search in a whiteout and needed to stay functional. The technique I had used once when I was rappelling into a ravine in the dark to reach an injured hiker, and I needed my hands to stay completely steady. My hands were steady. He came into the kitchen. I had my back to him, facing the stove, the way Camille said she always was when he came home. He would expect my back. He would expect the particular set of shoulders of a woman who had learned over 2 years to make herself small and unthreatening. What he got was me. "What's for dinner?" he said. Not a question, the kind of statement that is actually a command wearing question-shaped clothing. I turned around slowly. He was standing at the kitchen island in a gray merino sweater, the kind that costs $300 and is designed to look casual, and he was looking at me with the particular evaluative expression of a man who believes everyone in his vicinity exists in relationship to his needs. It took him perhaps 3 seconds to register that something was wrong, the eyes probably, or the way I was holding myself, which is not the way Camille holds herself. "Who are you?" he said. His voice had changed, gone flat in a specific way. "Where is my wife?" "Your wife is somewhere safe," I said. "I'm her sister. You and I are going to talk." Something moved behind his face. I had seen it before in other contexts. The rapid recalculation of someone who has encountered an obstacle they did not anticipate. Then the mask came back and he smiled, and the smile was cold enough that I was glad, genuinely glad, that Camille was not in this room. "I see," he said. "The soldier sister, Faye, right? She's mentioned you." He moved toward the island. "I don't know what she's told you, but I think there might be some misunderstanding about." "Don't," I said. Not loudly. He stopped. "I've spent the last 4 days going through your basement office. I have everything photographed. My sister's lawyer has everything photographed. We know about the $340,000 line of credit, the 2 additional business lines, and the personal loan you took out in both your names 18 months ago, without her informed consent. We know about the account you've been routing the Thornberry commissions through." He was very still. "You're going to want to call your lawyer," I said. "That's fine. That is actually the right thing to do, and I encourage it. But before you do, I want to make something clear to you." I took 1 step closer, which brought me to the other side of the island, maybe 4 feet away from him. "Whatever you are thinking right now about how to make this difficult for her, whatever plan you are forming about contesting, about making the debt litigation complicated, about using your resources to draw this out until she runs out of money, I want you to understand that it will not work the way you think it will, because she is not alone anymore. She has not been alone since Wednesday morning. And I am very patient, and I am very organized, and I have nothing else to do with my time." He stared at me for a long moment, then he said quietly, "You need to get out of my house." "This is also my sister's house," I said, "but I'll leave. I just needed you to hear that in person." I picked up the phone from the counter, stopped the recording, and looked at him one more time. "Your lawyer will be in touch with Sandra Okafor. Her office is in downtown Toronto. I suggest you instruct your lawyer to cooperate." I walked past him through the front hall out the door. I sat in my rental car for 2 minutes before I started driving. Not because I was shaken, I was not particularly shaken, but because I wanted to be certain I was fully present and not running on adrenaline when I called Camille. She answered before the first ring finished. "It's done," I said. "Are you okay?" A pause, and then she laughed, and it was the first time in 4 days I had heard her laugh, and it sounded like her. The actual her, not the careful muted version I had been watching navigate her own kitchen. "I'm okay," she said. "What happened? Tell me everything. I will not pretend the next several months were clean or easy, because they were not, and I think it would be dishonest to describe them that way." Marcus did call his lawyer. His lawyer was, apparently, quite good, a Toronto firm that specialized in high net worth family law and was not interested in moving quickly. There were 3 months of preliminary motions, during which Camille stayed at Sandra's guest room, and then moved into a short-term rental in Etobicoke, with the help of an emergency protection order that the judge granted based on the documented bruising, and a sworn statement from her family doctor, who had records of 2 previous visits, where Camille had given explanations for injuries that the doctor had noted, in careful clinical language, as inconsistent with the described cause. The doctor had been waiting, she told Camille afterward, for Camille to be ready. The debt dispute was complex and it was not fully resolved in 3 months. What happened was this. Sandra's motion argued successfully that the $340,000 line of credit's signature had been obtained under circumstances that met the legal threshold for undue influence under Ontario contract law, and the court agreed to a stay of Camille's personal liability while the full determination was made. It would take another year to fully resolve. But the stay meant that Camille was no longer paralyzed by the immediate threat of creditors, which meant she could breathe, which meant she could start to think about what came next. What came next, it turned out, was a call from an architectural firm in Hamilton that had been looking for a senior associate for 8 months. One of Camille's former colleagues, a woman she had stayed in loose contact with through the lean years, had passed her name along. The interview was, by Camille's account, the first professional conversation she'd had in years where she had not filtered every sentence through the question of whether it might cause problems at home. She got the job. Marcus's business in the meantime developed some difficulties. The Thornbury account discrepancies that I had found and photographed turned out to be of interest not only to Sandra but eventually to the CRA, which has its own timeline and its own methods, and requires no assistance from anyone. I am not suggesting any particular outcome of that investigation, which was ongoing at the time I stopped tracking it. I am simply noting that the documents existed, and that copies had been shared with the relevant authority, and that after that point the documents belonged to a process larger than any of us. By the following February, the divorce was finalized. The matrimonial home was ordered sold, proceeds split after the outstanding mortgage, with the question of the business debts addressed by a separate settlement that I will not detail here, beyond saying that Camille did not end up carrying any of it. She called me the afternoon the judge signed the final order. "It's done," she said. "It's done," I said. We were both quiet for a moment, the way you are quiet when something that has been very loud for a very long time suddenly goes still. "I keep thinking," she said finally, "about how I almost didn't call you that night. I almost talked myself out of it. I thought you'd say I should have handled it sooner or that I was being. I would never have said that. I know that now." A pause. "Thank you for coming." I was sitting at my kitchen table in Vancouver with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, looking out the window at the North Shore mountains going pink in the late afternoon. I thought about the drive from Pearson the morning she picked me up, the July traffic on the 401, the way she had looked out the window and said it had been a rough few months. "You don't have to thank me," I said. "You called, that's all you had to do." She was quiet for another moment. Then, "I start the Hamilton job in 3 weeks. Senior associate. They want me to lead the Barrie waterfront project." I felt something loosen in my chest that I had not fully realized was tight. "Camille." "That's wonderful." "I know," she said, and she sounded like herself. The 34-year-old woman she had been before all of this, the one who knew her own value and didn't look at every sentence before it left her mouth to check if it was safe. "I really think it is."